Hello there, it's Silver. Welcome to part 2 of this dual video thingy covering Chained Echoes. This time we're looking at the newly launched DLC, Ashes of Elrant. This is available for $10 and promises to add roughly 10 to 15 hours of fresh gameplay in a new area. Probably the weirdest thing about the DLC though is how it's integrated into the base game, and that it isn't, like at all. In a lot of RPGs, expansions and the like often add new NPCs that lead you to the opening of the new content, or add a new quest that kicks off your involvement in the new stuff. In this case, none of that happens. You simply select it from the main menu, instead of loading your traditional save, and it takes you to a new main menu just for the DLC. You start it from here, as well as load DLC saves from here, which are stored separately to the base game stuff. When you start the DLC, you have a choice between loading a base game save after you've completed it to import your party, or to start with a pre-made party if you want. I like the choice because it means people that aren't keen to finish the full game right now can still start up the DLC and try it out. I personally loaded my cleared base game save, but honestly I don't think it makes a big difference. When you start it, you'll lose all your gear, gems, and money, so you don't get to import that stuff. Also, everyone will be given 45 Grimoire shards to get them to max level from the start. So basically you start with no money, no gems, and new default gear stronger than what you had with a full party of maxed out characters. So I have no idea what the difference really is between loading your party or not. It seems to equalize them the same anyway. The new place to adventure through is a pretty good size. It includes 3 big outdoor areas to explore, a new city with lots of secrets, and some expansive caves and halls to find, usually packed with tough enemies and good loot. You'll find that all enemies, elites, and bosses are entirely new, nothing palette swapped from the base game, and there's plenty of improved gear for both you and your sky armors, both of which are quite important to find due to the strength of what you'll be facing. I mentioned in the first video that the game has a very lush and detailed pixel art style that stands out due to its warmth and use of background elements. This time around though, we're switching things up a bit with how the new zones look. Those same notes of warm autumn-like colors and great background detail remain while adventuring through the first zone, the Mushroom Forest, but there's something a little different, a little off right away. There's a sort of ethereal note happening, with some chromatic aberration towards the edges of the screen, which makes the whole place feel somewhat dreamlike. Once you make it to the ancient city of Elrant itself, that's when things take an obvious turn away from most of what the base game looked like. Water, for one, tons of it. The city has canals that run through the whole thing, and the size and layout of the city are quite sprawling. The water being a lovely cool blue contrasts heavily with the base game towns, mostly going for earth tones. Elrant is also made out of a white stone, making the whole place look stark and bright, mixing with that ethereal effect from before to give the whole city a ghostly presence that feels like a memory of a dream. The cool colors that dominate the city are a huge difference from the main game, and they'll extend into further areas as well. I think this was a smart decision. Giving the DLC a very different palette to work with means that nothing in it looks or feels like a place you've been already. The city and the palace at its center have a great style to them and are fun to wander around in, which is good because you'll be back here a lot for side quests, chests, and shopping. Then, once you strike out into the new exploration areas, things continue being very different. You have 2 big areas to explore, the Wasteland and the Deadlands, and although both of those things sound similar, they're very different in terms of visuals. The Wasteland is a desert with stark bright sand, not the warm orange of the base game, but a grayish white that combines that with the chromatic aberration to become harsh and unfriendly looking. As you explore further, you'll find rivers of quicksand that change how you explore. Those add a streak of dark brown to the desert. Then there's the Deadlands, my favorite area, which is entirely the opposite, a land of decomposing bits and bones sticking out of the ground. This place is darker than any area in the base game, and dominated by dark grays, blacks, super dark reds, and other bog-like colors, including a nasty brownish green water. When you combine all that with the ethereal aberration effect, you get an area where the atmosphere feels hostile and cursed, a place where, fittingly, a goth girl lives away from the city. Other areas you'll find, like the gardens and stone areas above the city, have this bright heavenly vibe, where everything is ancient and storied, a place where heroes have been and fought to defend. The gardens even have like a hedge maze and some giant chessboards to really drive home that opulent royalty vibe. Overall, the DLC is nicely varied in terms of environments, even in smaller total space, like this. The music is definitely worth mentioning as well. There's an all-new soundtrack composed of 16 tracks, including new area music, battle themes, boss scores, and bits that play for important story moments. One thing you'll notice right away that sets this music apart from the base game, it's jazzy. You'll immediately start hearing some driving new music with a focus on some variable time signatures and instruments like the saxophone taking their spot at the front of the tracks. The original soundtrack was great and had this orchestral arrangement feel, but the new stuff is more like what you'd hear in a downtown jazz club mixed with some ethereal vocals for certain areas. It's got a bassoon. Now, how often do you hear one of those in games? There's even a nylon guitar, which I usually associate with like flamenco, but this one is used differently. I'm a big fan of the Deadlands music as well as the underground tracks, and all the new battle stuff is great too. You'll also notice a tendency to shift to slower beats with wide open space and haunting choir vocals in places where there's ancient architecture and a lot of sky visible. It combines with that graphical effect I mentioned to give a feeling similar to the home shrine in Shadow of the Colossus, which I'm a huge fan of. Overall, I think they outdid themselves this time around. The areas are all very different and well detailed, and the new music matches perfectly with the visuals. I also like how that chromatic aberration effect ties everything together with this dreamlike bow, and you can provide each area with a bit of a different context depending on the vibe. It's clear the creator wanted to cram a lot of variety into the small space they had to work with, and I'd say mission accomplished on that. As far as the gameplay goes, they've done some things to mix up the formula while still remaining consistent with the base game. The gem system is new, there's a new character, some new growth mechanics, and there's even a new debuff to get smacked by, and new ultimate weapons that are even more ultimate-er than the base game ones with a new key item needed to upgrade them. One thing to mention though, it's well known at this point that some people don't gel with the combat. I mentioned it in my other video as something that doesn't really bother me too much, but can still be annoying at times, and the big shared issue most people have is that combat takes a long time because the enemies are very spongy and take forever to kill. They seem to be aware of this because in the DLC, it's even worse. Enemies now have massive, ridiculous health pools that are frankly too large to be reasonable. You can get quite strong in this DLC with all the new stuff, but even then, almost all enemies past the Mushroom Forest have such tremendous health pools that combat takes even longer now. This extends double for elites and bosses, by the way. I don't know exactly why they've decided to do this. It still doesn't ruin the game for me, but if you thought combat was too slow and enemies too spongy in the base game, then this will probably annoy you to no end. I feel like spending 30 minutes on a single boss fight that isn't a big end-of-story boss might be a little excessive. If you stick with it and use the methods you have to get stronger, you'll find yourself in a place where enemies become less horribly spongy, but it takes most of the DLC to get there. And some enemies don't really get any better simply due to massive health pools that can't be outmoded. The new character added is Leonar, the famed ancient hero you hear about in the base game. He uses fangs as weapons, and his kit is entirely based around setups for huge burst damage payoffs. He has attacks that can inflict bite marks on enemies, and then attacks that detonate those marks to amplify damage. He's also got buffs that enable extremely powerful attacks as long as the buff is active, but those attacks become dead space otherwise, as they don't have a weaker non-buffed form to compensate for how strong they are. He has even got a battle opener that does obscene damage, but only if it's the first thing he used in the battle. He has very high agility growth, even more than Sienna, and often gets the first turn and multiple turns per round, making him an extremely potent damage dealer. His progression works a little different. He starts out with all passives and stat ups already purchased, but his active skills aren't. He doesn't use grimoire shards like everyone else, and instead needs these medals you can find in chests around the new areas to be able to buy his attacks. The new weapons and armor you'll find are much stronger than the base game gear and can still be upgraded in the same way, but use new materials exclusive to the DLC. The gem system has changed though. You don't find gems from crystal deposits anymore, and mostly get them from killing enemies, stealing with Sienna, and sometimes in chests. Gems no longer have to be fused. The grade and purity systems are gone. Instead, every gem now drops at a specific level of power and stays that way. No need to combine them. Also, the 4-slot system is gone. Now all weapons and armor have 3 slots total that are unlocked when upgrading, and 1 gem takes 1 slot. Simple as that. I like this system a lot more than the original gems mechanic. There's less busy work, and as an added bit of quality of life, you can mess with these gems at any time in the equipment menu. No need to be at an anvil. There are some new ways to get stronger. A new resource you'll be gathering from winning battles are party points. These can be spent in a new screen full of various bonuses that tend to change things up a bit. There's one that extends the green portion of the overdrive gauge to the left, which means you start in overdrive now. There's another that makes you switch from Gear 2 back to Gear 1 in Sky Armor battles, skipping over Gear 0 altogether, adding passive TP regen to Gear 1. There's also one for each character that strengthens them when you purchase it. This DLC has a problem, though, with not giving the player info on certain things, so I don't know how much it adds to their stats. There are several others, but basically these are passive bonuses that enhance mechanics and make your party stronger. Exploring around in hard-to-reach places, you'll also find these golden fountains you can poke for permanent party-wide effects, though, again, I don't know exactly how much they do. All they say is that they increase the damage you deal and decrease the damage you take. By how much? Is it an even percentage for each? Is it based on stats? Does it affect only ground battles or also Sky Armor fights? This DLC seems to hate you having the information you need. These fountains can be hard to find and reach, although there is a party point bonus that adds a symbol on your HUD that tells you one is in the area. I have found one fountain that the symbol didn't appear for, though. There are also some minigames that were added, which is always fun. There's a digging minigame that involves exploring around until you find a blue circle on the ground, denoting a dig spot. Then you use this pulse to kick up dust and look for the spot where the most dust intersects. That's where you want to dig. Tap A to get a message, kind of like a hot or cold hint, and then eventually you'll nail the right spot and start digging. Just mash A and you'll eventually dig up whatever's there. Then move on and do it again. You have 60 seconds to do this and can restart if you need to. These are well worth it because the smaller rewards are powerful consumables, and the final reward is a new class emblem that clears the circle and ends the dig. The new class emblems you get this way are very strong and have lots of good stats and useful new skills, so it's well worth digging for them. There was also a fishing minigame added, and it's got to be one of my least favorite fishing systems in an RPG ever. You select a bait from like 10 choices and hover it in front of each fish's face, which will give you a reaction telling you vaguely how close the bait is to the one they like. Each fish only likes one, and it's different for each. Then you reel them in, being careful not to reel when they look away. But with how fiddly and vague finding the right bait is every time, and how the bobber constantly sinks but only moves up and to the left when you tap A, meaning you can't hover it in front of any given fish for more than like a second and a half, the whole thing was just so frustrating and unfun, I gave up on it after my first attempts and never went back. There's also a good amount of new stuff to fight in Sky Armors, including some bosses and elite enemies, and new models and pieces of gear that you'll need to survive against them. There are a few shops, mostly selling consumables and the new materials, and there are also plenty of new loot items in each area to turn in. This is good because you'll start the DLC with no money, and the new deals you can get have great stuff, but are very pricey when you have to start from scratch. I'm not going to spoil the story, but it canonically takes place just before the final battle in the base game, and illuminates some mysteries from the past. You'll also finally get to see what the Harbinger looks like, which is something I was expecting out of the big end boss rush of the original game, so that's a cool bit of extra context. I think the DLC also helps to better explain the events of the main game's ending. Although what happens is still kinda odd and very abrupt, the extra context you get here does fit into it. Overall, I think Ashes of Elrant is a worthy expansion of the base experience that adds enough shiny new stuff to justify the $10 price tag. It really does add 10 to 15 more hours, and the new character is a lot of fun to use. Some of the refined systems feel good in their new form. It does have its problems that keep it from true greatness, frustrating fights with oddly numerous and powerful enemies that seem way too strong to appear like 6 or 7 at a time, combat with enemies and bosses that simply have way too much health to be reasonable and make the new fights drag out sometimes, a real swing and a miss with the fishing, and a lack of useful information for the new mechanics, making how much they affect you a complete mystery. And yet I still enjoyed my time with this more than I was annoyed or frustrated. The new areas and music are great, the story is fun, and the extra mechanics add a little something new to work towards while experiencing the new bosses. So even though it isn't perfect, it's a good price, and it's built on a game solid enough to carry it through to an enjoyable place. I'll go ahead and put the link below to the DLC page on Steam. Thanks a ton for watching, and I'll see you next time.